Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Age of Meaning podcast. Thank you for joining us today. Social media is destroying the quality of your consciousness. Phones are bad. We all know it. Everyone knows it. This is a huge problem, collectively and individually. Now, if you think about it, social media, phones, computers, the internet has only really been around for a few decades now. It's a completely radically new thing in human history. And it's only in the last 5 to 10 years that social media algorithms and TikTok, Instagram Reels, and things like that have really taken off and become completely ubiquitous. And when you think about what social media does to the mind and what it does collectively with the mass spreading of free information, it's possibly one of the biggest changes that's ever taken place in human history ever. And you get to live through that. And so do we. We're all living through this right now together. And so in this episode, Florian and I give our thoughts on this issue, how it affects our minds individually and how it affects society collectively. Because this is one of the biggest issues facing mankind today. And it's one of the more material issues in terms of the meaning crisis. Because of social media, we're getting this massive epistemic chaos, this informational chaos. It's the age of confusion, the age of too much information. Nobody knows what's true and false anymore. Nobody knows what's right and wrong anymore. It's affecting us spiritually, mentally, intellectually, emotionally, socially, almost on all levels. And so this is a new thing. We're in the early stages of the internet, the early stages of social media. And it's going to change the world forever. So in this episode, we discuss that, we discuss some solutions, and we just think about this issue on a bigger picture scale. And I'm sure you'll relate to everything we say in this episode. So please like, comment, and remember to subscribe to Age of Meaning and enjoy the episode. And thank you for watching. Yeah, we just kind of allowed it to happen, right? Like we just decided. People just allow it. That's honestly one of the things I've always thought is like when they introduced Instagram Reels, like a few years ago, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, like everyone is addicted to scrolling on Reels. Like a new addiction just dropped. Literally everyone is on Reels. Your grandmother's addicted to Reels. And nobody stops to think about it. Like nobody's like saying, this is bad. Why are we addicted to this whole new form of
No,
content?
people were saying it's bad. I remember, bro. I remember sitting in my parents' living room and I'm on my phone all the time, like checking Reddit and Instagram, and my parents would always, comment on that and be like, "Why are you on your phone the whole time? Why'd you go out and do something?"
Yeah.
It's like it's an addiction, this and that. Now, when I go out to visit my parents, it's like in the evening, they're both just like silently in the living room, both on their phone, for like 2 hours or something. And then they show each other something every once in a while or something. And now they got sucked down the rabbit hole.
Now they understand, dude. Now everyone understands. Everyone's just happy in their little algorithm hole. They're just monitoring the situation. They're just looking at funny memes. They're like, why would I go off my phone? It's so comfortable in here, in this little
It's like an
phone
opioid
realm.
addiction, bro.
It is, man. But with the reels, though, the reels came recently, and that's what I'm saying. When nobody really challenged the idea of it, or it just happened. I mean, that's the thing. We have no control over it, and this is one of the craziest things, which I actually thought about some of this when I was doing that PhD application, was that we have all this control given to like Mark Zuckerberg and Sam Altman and Elon Musk. We have all this control given to these like few CEOs who control the social media, and then they basically control our phenomenology. Like they control our like direct experience of life because we just allow them. We get addicted to the phone. It's like in our hands all the time. And they've tweaked the algorithm now to make it more sensationalist and more extremist. And they've given us short form content. And it's like they're literally like some other people like sitting in like San Francisco that are like controlling my experience that's like 30 centimeters from me that I'm holding in my hand every day.
Yeah.
I don't know why. We're just not ready for it. We're not, we as a civilization, we're not ready for this thing called social media. It's just blindsided us.
Yeah, but in order to deal with it, in order to not get trapped by it, by these attention capture mechanisms, which are actually so pernicious, we would have to transcend our very nature. We'd have to transcend our biological impulses. And I wonder if we're ever capable of that. Do you think that there could be like a sort of a stage in the evolution of our consciousness that would allow us to not fall prey to these types of addictions? Is that even possible?
Well, I think it has to be possible. I think, yes, maybe Well, if you think about it, like literally historically, like in a material thing of is it possible for the whole of humanity, the average masses, the normal people, to no longer be addicted to technology? That does seem rather improbable. But I think it's possible. I think it's possible, like with cultural movement, that we reject phone addiction and we reject social media addiction. And yeah, like you say, it's all about, I don't know, it has to come down to the individual though. At least you can save yourself. You know, like before you even worry about the whole of humanity, you got to just save yourself and commit to not being addicted to it, because you have to realize what the cost of that is.
So we should just delete our Instagram, Reddit, TikTok. I mean, I'm not on TikTok, but it doesn't really matter. It's all the same, right? It's the same principle. Probably our lives would be so much better. Imagine not having a smartphone. It's like the only objection
10
that I
times
have
better.
or that I can come up with is that, like, well, I need to be in touch with my friends, like I need to coordinate with my friends. I want to be able to communicate with them and coordinate meetups and stuff like that. And there's just the logistic elements, the practicality of having a smartphone. But imagine you would have that and you just take away all of the mindless, useless distractions, constant distractions. Probably the quality of your life would improve drastically. First, you probably have a withdrawal period where you feel like, it's like I have this void in my life all of a sudden that I can't fill with these constant distractions that are just available at my fingertips. But probably just like with any other addiction, you go through that withdrawal period and afterwards the color returns to your life, right?
Yeah, for sure, dude. And your mind becomes less craving that thing. Your mind becomes more comfortable with boredom, and you actually understand what boredom is. So, I mean, dude, I did the Vipassana retreat where you had no phone, so I kind of experienced this to a degree. Although it's a little bit different though, because you are in a totally new environment. So it's not like you're in your normal home environment and then you take the smartphone out, because that is a bit different, I think. But that was one of the first things that I realized, is that my phone, I completely forgot about my phone addiction. I completely forgot about my phone. Like after one day, like I didn't think about my phone at all. And after like 2 days, I was literally thinking like, thank God I don't have a phone. Every time I went to bed and I had no phone, it was such a peaceful feeling. It's like, it's just me in the bed and I'm just going to go to sleep now. And that's it. And I realized like one of the things I thought was like, phone addiction is a lot like having the flu or having a thorn in your side. Because it's just this annoying thorn that's stuck in you the whole time. But once you take it out, you feel fine. You didn't actually need the phone the whole time. And when you have the flu, it's like all you can think about is having the flu. Like it's so pervasive, it's so prevalent and pervasive, the phone in your hands all the time and the addiction. But once you take it out, you realize that you just didn't need it at all. And then now you're like at the neutral level, whereas before you were like down there, so struggling with the addiction. And I realized that like I learned that a lot of the time when you go on your phone, you're actually trying to basically avoid suffering a little bit. Like, because doing this meditation, this Vipassana, like, you're sitting there, you have your like sensations, you have like a negative sensation arise. And so you're going through this experience of developing comfort and accepting and not resisting like negative sensations or negative thoughts and just accepting it. And so you sit there for an hour and you don't reach for something to like soothe you, like to self-soothe you, because you just feel it, you feel through it, you go deeper into the suffering or the pain. And then it was so clear to me that normally in daily life, we're just completely habituated to, as soon as there's a little bit of discomfort, maybe it's in boredom or like a little bit of anxiety or an emotional distress or something in the slightest form, then you just basically plug that wound with your phone. So you're basically always just responding to like a sensation or like boredom and just plugging your phone over that, which is actually so damaging, because you're supposed to feel your emotions. You're supposed to feel life. You're not supposed to numb yourself. Otherwise you're breaking the process of like what's supposed to happen. You're like clogging up your system, So yeah.
Probably it's also at odds with with having a purpose, right? It's like any type of addiction. It's like you're only addicted if there's a general lack of purpose in your life. And then that lack of purpose kind of leaves a bit of a gap or a void. And then you just fill that void with the pursuit of instant gratification that you get from whatever your addiction may be. But I think if you have a purpose, something to live for, something to give yourself to, something to devote your life to, something that you can contribute to the world around you, something that you have to offer, then I think you get into a different mode of being where you don't necessarily live for yourself. You live to give that thing that you feel called to give. And then the thing that you're addicted to doesn't have that same appeal, doesn't have that power to just drag you in, right? So I think that they're at odds with each other.
Yeah. I think, also having a purpose is about being, is having a purpose to like do something or serve something that's higher than yourself, orientated more than you, beyond you, either it's with other people or some higher principle, in service of some higher principle, but it's not about you. Whereas addiction, and that's what happens with addiction, is that your world just gets smaller and smaller because you're only concerned with your own gratification.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting that most people in our culture, in the world today, generally, just everywhere, are addicted to something in some form.
And you become almost a little bit subhuman if you're really addicted. It's like you lose some of your humanity, right? And you become more like an animal, just controlled by his passions, basically. Even though, to give animals some credit, like they've done experiments with rats, for instance, which are very interesting, where they have rats in confinement, basically like rats in little cages, isolated cages. And they would give those rats access to unlimited cocaine through a little drinking bottle, right? So these rats in confinement, they would just, hit the cocaine until they would overdose, basically. They would just keep hitting the cocaine and get the high from the cocaine. Works directly on their little mammal brain, which is actually very similar to how a human brain functions. That's why they always do these social experiments on rats. They would just keep hitting it until they would overdose. So initially, when they did that study, the conclusion was like, well, cocaine is just simply that addictive that if it's available, a rat or a creature like a rat would just, keep consuming until it kills itself, basically. But actually, that conclusion later had to be corrected when they did a new study where instead of having the rats in a closed confinement, they would put the rats in a social environment which they shared with other rats, basically like a little rat paradise where they could play. They had food available to them. They could mate. They could have this whole social life. Then if they made cocaine available to the rats, basically they're pretty much uninterested in the cocaine. And if they would use it at all, they would never overdose. So then the conclusion is that actually addiction, with overdose as a consequence, is actually a symptom of social isolation or a lack of the quality of life in general, right? And it's only in that type of context that addiction can really wreak the havoc that it did on the rats, which is so interesting, right?
I think I've also heard of that study. I think also like it's interesting though, because some people do get addicted when they have everything. They have the social situation, and it seems like they have everything that you would want for a high quality of life. But people still get addicted, and many people like are living good, healthy lives, and they still have their phone addiction that's just lingering there. Whenever they have a moment to themselves, they go on their phone, which I think that's interesting. But I think generally, like, maybe it's not necessarily the social thing, but it's like the quality of your mind or the happiness level or the fulfillment that you feel, like generally. Because you could have everything. You could have a good social life and have a comfortable life and have like a satisfying job, but then there's still like an underlying level of discontent that you haven't fully experienced, or it's just there. And then you can easily just plug that with the phone. And I think the phone is interesting because it's not the same thing as drugs. Like drug addiction is like a much more like pronounced addiction kind of, whereas the phone is just kind of ubiquitous and it's just kind of a little bit of minutes here and there. And it's kind of habit. You can imagine like the happiest people, even if they're just totally happy and then they go sit on their own for a second, they're going to take out their phone. They're going to start scrolling on Instagram because it's so stimulating and it's so like entertaining.
Yeah.
It's so easy to do that. So yeah, I think we have to take a stand against the phone addiction because it really ruins your relationship to reality as well. And not even in the way, and this is not even to say anything of the epistemology of it,
Mm. Right. I was going to raise that point as well.
Because I mean, half the time what we're doing when we're mindlessly being addicted and scrolling is consuming information, just information the whole time, like, or people's opinions. I mean, even on a low level, like people like dating advice and like opinions from people that are like 16-year-olds, like telling you how you should live or how your partner should be, or, like,
Yeah,
and it's
it's
just
that.
all these little cultural ideas getting into your mind. And that's just, cultural ideas. It's like
Yeah.
the ultimate brainwashing system going on.
Yeah, I mean, you have like the big tech companies who are running these applications. Basically, their objective is, well, to increase their power in the market, like to increase the value of their company for their shareholders. So that's their only objective. So they're just trying to capture as much of your attention as they can, because then they have more income in terms of like ad revenue, for instance, right? Then you have like all of these creators, and the creators are just competing with each other also for attention in this market, which is like the competition is killing. So basically they're just doing everything they can in order to go viral and capture the attention of the masses, which means that the content that they're going to be producing is going to be the content that is most stimulating to what we're already primed to be captured by. And so it's going to be like a controversial content. It's going to be like stimulating visual imagery. It's going to be the type of rhetoric that is going to get the most traction, or get the most responses out of people. It's not going to necessarily be the most high quality content. It's not going to be the most inspiring. It's not going to be the most constructive, right? I think the only thing you can do in order to guard against it is just to get off social media, to stop engaging with this completely toxic environment. It's been ruined. The internet's fucked. Well, you can use the internet deliberately. Like you can use the internet like you would use a library. Like you go to the library to harvest certain information, learn the things that you need to learn, and then you leave the library knowing what you need to know, right? If you treat your laptop or your phone like a library that you can consult, just like the most expansive and vast, inexhaustible library you could ever wish for, then that's great. It's an insanely powerful tool at your fingertips. Like you can use it to your advantage, and do real things with it. That can have real benefits, but that's how you should treat it, right? And not as something that kind of like, defines half of your social life. Half, it's like, that's even a low estimate. It's like more like 80% of people's social life is actually spent online, right? It's such a waste.
Yeah, and the thing is that there's an illusion to like the content algorithm situation, where the algorithm like Reels, where you're not actually treating it like a library. You think like, I'm getting information about the world, like I'm learning stuff. Well, that's how it feels, but actually that's not how you go to a library. That's not how you learn information. You don't go to the library and just get presented with like one page of each book in the library for an hour and then leave. That doesn't do you any good. That's basically what like TikTok and Instagram is. You have to just pick something and read a book, actually learn something, instead of just having your mind like exposed to this like fire hose of nonsense for an hour, and opinions and jokes and memes and all kinds of things mixed in together.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things, is that and I see this with a lot of people, where I can tell that they don't read books, and they don't even watch long form content like podcasts or something. And their main source of information is literally like Instagram and Reddit and TikTok. And that's just, it's like there's no level of like the epistemic solidity of these platforms is just like nothing. Like, and so much of what controls the information that you see on Instagram, you're being influenced by it. What controls it is like hive mind, groupthink, and what's popular for everyone else, and what's the most sensationalist. So you're not, so it's just like, and so it can give you the illusion of knowledge.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not under your volition. It's not like you're making a deliberate, conscious choice. This is what the content I want to engage with. This is what I'm actually interested in. Like it used to be the case on Reddit. You would subscribe to certain subreddits. Like I have these interests, so I'm following these subreddits. There are posts that are made by other human beings who are also interested in it. And in this, it's like a forum. There's an exchange of information. There's something wholesome about that. It's like, sure, if you want to look at funny memes or something, there's a subreddit for that or whatever. But you're not constantly bombarded with entertainment. And now even Reddit itself is ruined because you constantly get suggested posts. You see suggested contents from subreddits that you would have never subscribed to, that from your volition you wouldn't have never have said like, yes, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to be looking at. But now it's like out of your voluntary control because you just get shown it, and like without even thinking about it, you're already paying attention to it because it's like, it's kind of impossible to ignore because it's literally designed to grab your attention. And then once that has you, it's like you're hooked, like you're on a hook, and then it just starts giving you more because it's already learned that like, this is how we get him. But they show you a bunch of different things. It's just the bait that's just dangled in front of you. There's gonna be something that grabs your attention, and then immediately the algorithm learns like, this is how we can bait him, and then so it's out of your control.
And then imagine you have some sort of insecurity about something, like you have some sort of insecurity, or you have some sort of like, I don't know, weird position about, and then you see a subreddit or post that just exploits your insecurity. And that's what like the whole manosphere is, like the Andrew Tate types and like the looks maxing. And all of a sudden it's like you could have gone through your life, like if you were born in some other remote some town, like if you were Amish or something, I don't know, and you were just living an Amish consciousness life, you would have never thought about looks maxing and like the ratio of your face and like all this nonsense that these people are obsessed with now, the current trend. But now you're exposed to that, and then it becomes a thought in your mind because you're basically like part of the hive mind. And it's so negative, and so there's so much discipline
exploiting these psychological vulnerabilities.
Yeah,
it should be a crime.
So much
like there
discipline.
should be. It's time for severe regulations on these algorithms, because we can't just leave this up to the market, because frankly, like we're too psychologically vulnerable to just be captured by those mechanisms and to become the play ball of these political dynamics and these corporate interests. And it's like it's time that collectively we say like, no, we don't want that. Fuck off. Like we're gonna disallow you to do that. We're gonna have regulations in place that actually say like, this is not acceptable. This is not how we want our world to be, dominated. Think about the impact this is having globally on humanity as a whole. It's ridiculous. I think this is where where Europe, where the European Union, they need to lead the charge and say like, no, we're gonna regulate this. I mean, China's doing it because China's doing it in their, what they think is their national interest, right? So at least they're doing something. It's like in America, it's just left over to the market, and like the person with the most money and the most power can just use it to their own advantage, right? And there's no restrictions on that, basically.
In America, they love it. I mean, the current government does, because the only reason Trump was elected was because of the groupthink of social media and the pro-Trump content and the podcasts. It's the only reason Trump won, because all the young people got brainwashed into this hive mind by these fucking social media edits that made Trump look like Superman. And that's like literally the level of democracy going on now.
Insane.
In America.
Insane. And everything was a lie. It was all a lie, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing. Yeah, I mean, I used to watch that Kyle Kalinske. I sent you his channel the other day. And he would say, like, before the second election, in between, and that Trump was running on the anti-war campaign. And everyone just believes it. Like, Joe Rogan's like,
Exactly.
yeah, no, I like Trump because he's anti-war. Like, he's the anti-war president. And, the Democrats are pro-war, obviously, because Trump said that. But then this guy, Kyle Kalinske, like an actual news journalist, like an actual news guy, would be like, no, let's look at the record. Like, what did Trump actually do during his first term? And you see, like, he was never actually anti-war. And,
so what does he do now?
Because
he does the very thing that none of his predecessors has even dared to do. It's like attack Iran. Start an illegal war against Iran. Why? Well, because Israel dragged him into it. Because, well, it's very plausible, it's highly likely that the amount of blackmail material that the Israeli government has on Donald Trump and other like people high up in Donald Trump's government is so insane that basically they can just bend his hand, right?
Yeah. But also, like, there's also the other element of like Iran having nuclear weapons and how they started rebuilding their nuclear weapons. So there is a pretense, and America also the military-industrial complex does like going to war. But generally, just the point of this is that one of the things is that we're all getting our information from social media on this largely. I'd say like 80% of the time, and so like we're never diving deeper into like a deep dive into an analysis of what's going on. And so that's the thing. We're all kind of in the dark because we're flooded with all these opinions and these like movements that are coming from other people. So.
Right. Everybody has, it's like on the one hand, it's like everybody has a platform. Everybody's franchised. Everybody can voice their opinion and has access to a potential audience. But at the same time, it's not actually true because people who have a platform truly are the people who, rise to the top in this environment. And that's not just, that's not actually a democratic it's not a democratic process. It's not a fair process. It's actually the environment is deeply corrupt. It's structurally corrupt, right? And so it's much more problematic than this hypothetical ideal of like, well, everybody has a platform now and can express their opinion, and also because 99% of all people are not actually creating content, are not actually voicing their own original opinion from a place of autonomy, of actually having an independent opinion that's formed through experience or research or some other valid source of authority. It's basically a very small percentage of people that are actually producing content, and most of it is actually disingenuous.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, dude. That even raises the bigger point of like democracy, like what the value of democracy and what it means to have a democracy, because now we have this race to the bottom. This is in like game theory, I don't know, like you have this race to the bottom of incentives where the incentive structure is to just get attention and make content. So everyone's just friggin' attention whores the whole time and trying to make money from it and get views and go viral. And then the incentive, the way you go viral is by exploiting the lower nature of human beings and like being sensationalist and vulgar and crass and saying the most extreme things. And so then it's like this, what rises to the top generally is like the most, it's the stuff that's most exploiting people's human brains, human minds. So there's this negative incentive structure, and it's like, but it's kind of like the question of democracy, like, going back to like Plato and stuff. It's this question of like, should we have democracy? Because now you can see where this is basically fully democratic. Okay, well, you have the algorithms things going on in the hands of like the tech companies. But if you just left everyone to their own devices, everyone could make content. Like, what would rise to the top? And I think we've seen to some degree, like, look at what rose to the top before Trump. Like, Trumpism and MAGA stuff rose to the top because like there's enough people that just like found that content cool basically and didn't have like the knowledge or the awareness to step back and realize like, wait, there's like freaking totalitarianism lurking here. There's a guy who's a pathological liar. There's like right-wing extremism lurking here. Historically, this is like not good. But that just all flew out the window because they're just bombarded with these cool Trump edits. So you know, like this is kind of the limits of like democracy or limits of freedom or like freedom of speech. It's like, you know, this is the problem with, it's kind of a human problem where if you have a huge crowd of people and someone shouts, you know, someone starts spreading ideas, then it's people believe it, and then you vote for the people in power, and then you have a war in Iran, and then people, you know, so. But I don't know what I think one of the solutions, one of the definite easy solutions, is that you ban algorithms, you ban feeds, because they changed the feeds at one point, right? So like you're talking about the European Union and stuff, like on Twitter and stuff, you can still go onto your For You page, and you can go onto your following page. And the following page is a totally different experience. It's like literally like if you're on the For You page on Twitter, it's like a freaking hell realm. It's terrible. And then you switch over to the following page, and it's like calming, relaxing. It feels like your brain is like just relaxed for a second because you're following these nice, chilled accounts that are just people posting their opinions. You got these spiritual accounts,
and it's like that's where you're sovereign, like you're in control, like you have curated your feed, right? And it's like, now the curation is like outsourced. There's no more curation. You're just in a passive recipient mode, right? You're just being bombarded with whatever. They're just shooting stuff at you to see what will stick, what will hook you, you know? And it's like you don't even have voluntary control over it, because if you're gonna show me an image that's just stimulating to me as a primate, then it's like I can't help but be stimulated by it, right? That's not under my control. That doesn't mean that I've given my consent. Well, in a way I have, because I signed the terms and agreements, and I use that app, or basically that's that.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And this is the thing. This is one of the things that I find it's so ironic that when people think that they're so autonomous, and you know, like the rise of the conspiracy theory now, it's like this groupthink conspiracy theory where it's just everything's a conspiracy all the time. And it's like people, it feels like people have their own autonomy, and they're like, I'm discovering the truth. Like I'm finding out, really, like I'm really learning about life. It's like, no, you're a victim to the groupthink, to the hive mind going on now. And you're not curating any of this. And so you haven't actually, and you also haven't learned any real insight. So I think people also don't know what it's like to actually learn, to like deep learning, to like study something structurally, and to like get into the depths of it, and then to have insight generated, and then to have an understanding, and not just be told like opinion, and just like it's totally different. So it's So I mean, that's the thing. It's like, don't be a victim. Don't be a victim of, and it's groupthink. You know, it's all conformity, Because how many, like, why do you even give authority to these perspectives? And the other thing is that epistemically, even if it's not just a picture on text, like sometimes you'll just see a picture, text, or a video, and you just believe it. Other times you'll see like a whole perspective, a story, like an account of the news, like political situation, or anything. And then you have this whole like narrative being formed, and you're like, okay, yeah, that makes it sounds like it makes sense, which it does. But then you don't even have the epistemic certainty to know that that's not like half of the story, or that the person who made that, when they wrote it, they deliberately left out the other part of it, or they didn't even know the other part of it, and they just cherry picked it. But because it's in this like low resolution, ultra processed emotional landscape, you don't even think about what's like going on behind that, the layers behind that. Whereas if you're reading a book, or if you're listening to a long form podcast, it lays out the thought, and you can actually adjudicate it in like a sane, normal way.
Yeah. And you should also look at like, what is the actual effect that this is having on me? Because even regardless of whether something is true or not, something might be true, but it might actually be pushed on you, because the effect that it's going to have is like emotional turmoil. And it's going to basically create an us-them dynamic, and it's sort of going to drive polarization in the society. And there are actually very powerful actors, you know, who are pushing that, who are putting a lot of money into pushing that type of content. Why? Because they directly benefit from the effects that it's having. So it doesn't matter if it's true or not. It probably always is a little bit of a gray area. It's like has simile of the truth, but also some falsehood, and it's true enough to be, you know, accepted by people at face value. But the point is actually not whether it's true or not, whether it's giving you any kind of insight into, you know, what's really going on. The point is actually that it's gonna incite a certain attitude in you, which serves somebody else's political agenda, you know, which serves on somebody else's power agenda. So you need to think about like, what is the effect of this information on me, on my mood, on the quality of my life, you know, on my attitude. So that's just something I wanted to add in there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it always makes your mood worse, I would say. Like if you scroll on Instagram for an hour, you're not going to feel better than you did before. Like there's just no way. Like it doesn't create a good positive mood. It doesn't and that's the craziest thing. Why are we allowing these other human beings? Like why are we first of all allowing like the whole internet into our lives like every day, like all these opinions and content that's being created for other people's reasons? And why are we allowing these tech companies in to just change our phenomenology? Like it's created this like whole nother layer of existence. This like simulacrum of reality, which is like this thought-based content cultural view of the world, which is interesting, and that's like a new interesting thing, but you're just constantly bombarded with it. So why, we need to take control. We need to have sovereignty over our own freaking mind and our own physical space, because there's like human beings in our space all the time, in our minds all the time, putting our thoughts in our minds. And you talk about meditation, it's like, why would you forget about meditation? If you're into meditation and you're on your phone all the time, like you're just double screwing yourself, because normally, in meditating, you're trying to like be aware of your thoughts and not have all these uncontrolled thoughts like dragging you around and being a victim to your thoughts. But then with social media, you're just adding another layer of thoughts. You're adding other people's thoughts in your mind all the time. Like it's insane.
It's not just your monkey mind, it's like the collective monkey mind.
Yeah. Exactly. It's a fucking disaster. Like it's the worst case scenario possible if you're looking at it from a mindfulness perspective and a sanity perspective, because you have other people's thoughts in your mind before you can even get to your own thoughts that are not influenced so much.
So don't forget to like and subscribe.
Yeah. Keep watching our content. This is different, I swear. It's totally chilled and cool. Our thoughts are good thoughts, okay? Like you can trust us. But I think really though that like there's just one thing that was on my mind earlier, was when you said that what's the effect that this is having on the whole world, like as a collective, like if you think about that, like the collective consciousness or just the suffering that's being inflicted on people as a whole in our story right now in mankind, like, or the lack of mental sanity and like mental hygiene going on because of this. So like the whole world is being afflicted by this addiction and this thought chaos and stuff, and
getting more fractured.
Yeah. And that also brings up the other point, which I also thought about a bit with that PhD application, was that on the one hand, it's a positive thing. So maybe it's also valuable to think about the positives now, like what are the positives of social media? Because on the one hand, there's this profound, like incredible thing of the democratization of information. It's like everyone can say anything and information spreads, it flows like never before. And you have like, another Gutenberg moment where like when they invented the printing press in the 1600s in Germany, and that completely changed the world. One of the most significant moments in history. Oh, 1500s.
1400s, like 15th century.
Okay. Right. But then, okay, yeah. Well, so this is really in the 1400s. So it's not like 1500s. Okay.
Pretty sure.
So yeah, I mean,
let me fact check it.
No, that's okay. It's okay. But so the effect of the printing press, the Gutenberg moment, was huge. One of the biggest moments in history. One of the things that happened because of that was because they basically, what this was for people who don't know, is when they invented printing books, the printing press. So now you could have books printed like never before. So books were being read and printed all around Europe. And one of the effects was the Protestant Revolution, where people stopped being Catholic because now people could read the Bible themselves and they didn't have to rely on the external authority of the church. And basically all kinds of political movements happened. One of the consequences, which I didn't know until recently, was that there's a theory that accounts for the Salem witch trials, like the Salem witch trials in America and stuff, also was happening in Europe, that it was a result of the printing press, because now people started printing books that were basically conspiracy books about witches and like how to see if someone's a witch, how do you diagnose witchery and whatnot. And it was because of the books that this idea spread like wildfire, and then this collective insanity happened.
Wow.
But on the other hand, though, there was also a massive leap forward, a quantum leap forward in human knowledge because of the Gutenberg moment, because now we have books. And now like the amount of writing and the amount of knowledge that's being produced and like stored since then has been amazing. So the internet is also like democratizing information. And, like in like a religious, spiritual sense about the world, it's like a lot of people are being exposed to new ideas. A lot of people are a lot more open-minded. And the world's kind of opening up epistemically. And that can be a good thing in the long term. So do you think, I don't know, how do you think those two things can be like leveled out? Or do you think that the benefits like are worth it, or how can we navigate that?
Yeah, I think probably we just have to wise up. We have to mature and transcend our basic instincts. Basically, that's what it's confronting us with. It's like the extent to which we're controlled by our sort of primal instincts, our passions that draw us into any type of addiction. That's what we're being confronted with at a massive scale now, and in a way, it poses a challenge for us. It's like either we go down with this and we just kind of fail as a species, in order to cope with the world that we've created. Or we mature enough in order to transcend this, and we make certain decisions that we put certain thresholds in place, or certain guardrails that limit the negative effect of these technologies. And I think we can do that through regulations. And like there are many examples of how that has been done in the past. And there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to do that now, when we come together as a collective and make a democratic decision about how, in what way we want to limit, the effect that this type of technology is having on our lives. Because, we prioritize the quality of our lives over the profits of shareholders or the influence of billionaires, and I think that that's going to be a process of us as a collective, as a culture, of coming to terms with that and making a decision about that. And probably it's going to take some time before people really wise up to what's going on, and there's going to have to be a different type of rhetoric that confronts people, that points people towards what's going on and why it could be different. We're not just at the mercy of, sort of the technocratic, upper class, the technocratic elite. It's like we live in a free world. We live in a democracy.
Yeah, and I think we've been blindsided by this, because the real influence of tech has only been the last 10 to 20, I mean, the internet only came around about in the 90s, and social media changed in the 2016 around then when they did like the algorithms and stuff. So it's only been like 5, 10, 20 years. And that's just a tiny amount of time in human history. So we're not able to deal with this. We haven't been able to deal with it yet to even realize the significance of what's happening.
Right.
And I think one of the things is that one other interesting thought that just came to me is that, well, it's also, you can also kind of think about it on the other hand, like where it's interesting. It's almost like the internet is like the collective unconscious of humanity kind of being expressed in online to a degree. It's like you could see it as like, well, the collective thoughts of mankind are now externalized and being seen by everyone. And that's kind of got to have like a powerful effect for like evolution of our culture. And because we're suddenly so aware of ourselves, basically, of ourselves and everyone else. So now it's almost like the collective is being expressed and has this expression, these thoughts being expressed all the time. It's like this network of thoughts all the time. I don't know. Do you think that analogy tracks though? Like as in like a Jungian, I think so. Not necessarily, it doesn't have to be like a strict Jungian definition of the unconscious, but like, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah, I think the unconscious is also, in a way, what I point towards, because in the unconscious also reside, these animal passions or drives, and in a Freudian sense, like our libidic sort of sex drive or lust or something like blind lust. You also see that expressed in the overabundance of pornography on the internet. It's like how much of the internet isn't, like actually pornographic in nature. It's insane, the extent, the scope of that.
And even
it's such a
regular
toxic industry, actually.
Sorry, I was just gonna add, like even just regular just a regular conversation that's all sexualized, and like regular posts, Twitter posts, and all the sexualized content, discussions about this kind of low level sexual element to things. It's
And
I
it
just wanted
just
to add
shows
that.
that for a large part, I think for a large part, we're like, it exposes our primal nature. It's like we're basically primates. If you would give like a bunch of monkeys access to like sexually stimulating like visual imagery or something, then they would get, just as stimulated by that as we seem to get. So basically, it's confronting us with that type of animal nature, animal instinct. Um, and you can judge that. You can sort of call it morally debased or whatever, but also we can see it as actually a mirror that's showing us, what we are, even though maybe those are parts of ourselves that we don't find so flattering. And that when we accept that image in the mirror, then we can actually come to terms with that. And then what it does, it asks something of us. It asks of us, the questions like, is this who we want to be? Or do we want to be better than that? And I think human beings have this capacity, maybe unlike primates, to say like, well, I see what the image presents, and actually I don't want to be that. And so then the question is, look, how do I transcend that? And human beings have this capability of transcending their passions, transcending their lower nature. And like this is a core part of like moral teachings throughout the ages, like how do you, transcend the animalistic passions? It's like this is one of the major projects in philosophy and in religion, that teach you sort of how do you transcend these passions, these passions of the flesh, so to speak. And it's possible to say no and to decide, like, actually, I want to lead a different type of life. I am not going to watch pornography every day and masturbate. It's like, I don't want to, spend my energy and my time doing that, which actually makes me feel debased and makes me feel guilty and doesn't make me feel that I can be proud of myself and what I'm doing. And I'm making a decision to course correct, like where my course is no longer determined by my animalistic nature, but rather by my human nature, where actually I am sovereign, I am in charge. And yes, I have certain passions and drives that are animalistic in me that I cannot deny, but I don't necessarily have to let those govern me, right? It's like, am I being ridden by a lion, or am I the one riding on the lion's back? And if you're the one
Mm,
riding on the lion's back, then it's the proper order of things. And then the animal nature is still part of you. It can actually serve you in certain moments, but it doesn't control you, right? You're the one who is the charioteer. You're the one who is in charge, so to speak. We have that capability. And I think this is a process that as a collective, as humanity, we're still in the midst of that. But yeah, I'm optimistic that we're going to manage
mm,
that. It's possible. And every one of us
mm,
can already lead by example. It's easy to criticize, but actually the real value and virtue is in leading by example, right?
mm. Absolutely. I think that's really well said. And I think on that note of like, you have the ability. You don't have to be a victim. You just don't have to be a victim. And that ties into what we were saying earlier about like, what kind of posts, if you're going to be online, like what kind of posts are you engaging with? Like what are you letting the algorithm exploit you into? Like don't let it abuse you. Don't be a victim of the algorithm. Like you have a choice, and you have a choice of what things you're going to believe and what trends you're going to be sucked into and all that. Um, it just made me think of that. We're basically just being these passive victims of these tech companies and other people in the hive and brainwashing. It's really a sorry state. But on the other hand, also to your point, on the other hand of the fact that we can overcome this, we can transcend this, is that with all the epistemic chaos, all the informational destruction going on and the confusion going on, I also have this theory that I'm also optimistic, is that I think that in the future, it's possible that now we're being exposed to all this information, we're being exposed to the thoughts of everyone. And basically more than ever, people are just reading little pieces of information all the time. And it may be the case that in like many years' time, we actually become more knowledgeable and more wise as a culture because we've been exposed to just so much information, just the sheer volume of information. And I've thought about this where it's like, if you have a child and you just expose them to more information, like what happens is that they become more wise and they become more discerning and they know more things. They'll know more, have more have more data points, become more discerning, and have a more open-minded, more worldly perspective of the world. And maybe it's the case that we're going through this kind of birthing process, this like really difficult process of now being exposed to like almost all information in the world at once. But maybe over time, in one generation, in 2, 3, 4, 5 generations, we'll actually be so much more intelligent because of all the information that we've been exposed to. As long as the algorithms and the lower natures don't destroy us like before we get there, you know? If we can manage to regulate the algorithms and just manage it like and not fall prey to it, then it could be actually a great thing that makes our minds more integrated and more connected, and we come online as a more intelligent, more enlightened society if we can manage the pitfalls. And they're treacherous. So that's what I would hope. But I mean, in the meantime, though, it's like on individual level, we got to stop using social media. We should do like a challenge for each other that we stop using our phones, or we severely limit the phones.
Yeah, that's my question also. Like, what is a good first step? Is it just like to delete Instagram and Reddit? Those are like the main things for me. And accept the fact that I'm just not gonna stay as much up to date on what my friends are up to, you know, which is the only kind of real tangible sacrifice that's a part of that. Or to just limit the amount of time I spent on my phone, like have a time slot, or just like try and resist the urge to take it out of my pocket. Like, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, you know, it's funny because I met this guy who was hosting these Vipassana meditations, and I said that after coming out of the retreat, my phone had like, I've gone sucked back into the phone, and it felt like it depleted all that energy. And he said, you know, I only check my phone 3 times a day. And he's like, that's it. He checks his phone at 9 a.m, at 12 p.m, and at 5 p.m. And like, if you want to contact him, you're going to have to wait until that time that he checks his phone. And the rest of the time, his phone is just not there. He's not a thing. It's not a habit. It's not an addictive dummy that you can suck every 5 minutes because it's like in another room or something. Right. I don't know. I'm also thinking about that. I mean, I have these app blockers on my phone where you can set it so you can't change it, and then there's time limits and reels can be blocked. But for me, yeah, I mean, I guess for me, I would just have to block it permanently and for a really long time, so I can't unblock it. But yeah, I don't know.
I will experiment a little bit with it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning into our conversation, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more content. You know, please stay tuned.
Keep watching our content. It's different, I swear.
All right.
Cool. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe.
See you next time.